All right, so picking up right where I left off in the last video, the third implication of the nous, or pure awareness, being qualifiedly different, distinct, unique from consciousness at large, or consciousness in general, is that we humans are capable of acquiring immortality. But there's a qualification to that. And I can't explain it without setting this up first. So let me set this up. I've spent a lot of time on this channel in one way or another criticizing dualism. And not duality per se, there's a place for it in non-dualism, but criticizing absolute duality, or what you might call an essential duality. Reality cannot be explained by an essential duality or absolute duality. So, though we are distinct from God in his transcendent aspect, we do not have any such thing as a unbridgeable separation between a realm that is eternal, fixed, eternal, non-contingent, and then a separate realm, quote unquote, below it, that is purely temporal and contingent, because there's no possible way to bridge that. It's an infinite chasm. So I've criticized the Christian doctrine of the incarnation. It's not able to bridge that. The uncreated energies in Eastern Orthodox theology, where I came out of, is not able to bridge that. Emanationism and Platonism and Neoplatonism is unable to bridge it. So, if that's what we were looking at, we would simply be mortal creatures who would die inevitably. No matter how many reincarnations you went through, or how high you elevated your consciousness, it would just be in our nature to die, and we would have to die, and there would be no way to extend our life to anything qualitatively approaching immortality. With that said, see, so now there's the opposite extreme. You have this extreme monism or non-duality, which says that the individual must return to his primordial state, which is non-differentiation. Therefore, the individual, qua individual, gets annihilated and merges back with God in his transcendent or holistic aspect. But that would be to assume there is no distinction whatsoever between God in his transcendent aspect and God in his effects, which would be us and all living things and all differentiated beings. So even though there aren't two separate realms that are separated by an infinite chasm, there's still a very essential distinction between God and the creature. God, and in this case, we're focusing on the human being, who is unique in terms of his possession or ownership of a nous, right? So, which is equivalent with spirit here. So, I think the concept of eternal causation, which you find in the Christian doctrine of the Trinity is actually a very important concept. And a lot of people dismiss that. A lot of non-Christians dismiss that because it seems it creates a lot of dissonance in their minds. You know, how can you have something that's caused but also eternal? But I'll be getting into more detail about why it's necessary. But for now, they apply it in an illegitimate way, though, to the Trinity, in a way that they would not apply to creation. So they still have that fundamental dualism between God and creation, because they have two levels of causation, where they believe that two members of the Holy Trinity were eternally caused by the Father, but then you have the world, which is temporally caused. So you still have that dualistic division between the temporal realm of creation and the eternal realm of the Godhead. So it still doesn't work for them. We are borrowing the idea of eternal causation alone. We're not adopting any sort of temporal causation as distinct from eternal causation. So we are divine because we are eternally caused by God in his transcendent aspect. We are an immanent aspect of divinity. We are the way that God appears when he chooses to differentiate or divide himself. Okay? But that process is an eternal process. So because it's eternal, individuation is just as essential. A God in his individuated state is just as essential as God in his non-individuated state, or in his transcendent state. So we are not ephemeral. You know, we are permanent as individuated beings. Not simply because we were eternally caused. Otherwise, you could say the same thing about an animal, right? About animals. Animals go back into consciousness, undifferentiated consciousness, the body of God, when they die. We, because of the nous, we remain eternally individuated. So, as a result, here is the subtle distinction then, as it pertains to immortality. We have it, or we can acquire it by virtue of being divine, by virtue of being an aspect of divinity. But we don't have immortality as an innate quality like God does in his transcendent aspect. So as a result, when we acquire immortality, it will be conditional. That is to say, it can be lost. So we could be, let's say we attain to a higher dimension, right? Where our bodies become finer, more spiritual, more translucent, let's say. So the same things that harm us now would not harm us. Like a bullet would probably go right through us, right? Or, you know, we couldn't die of a knife wound, or getting hit by a truck, or crashing in a plane, or of a disease, because those would be largely eliminated, and actually by that time they would be preventable. We wouldn't even have to bother probably healing disease at that point. But I imagine that we would still be doing battle with the forces of evil. And there would be ways at that level of existence for the forces of evil to inflict mortal wounds upon our being, right? So we would have a kind of conditional immortality, one which required a regular ingestion of something, or maybe it wouldn't be an ingestion, but I imagine that's what it would be. It would be something like that, which would require a periodic partaking of in order to continue extending our life, right? So that is how I understand the nature of our being, as being both eternally distinct from the transcendent while being eternally part of his being. So God exists in two modalities: the transcendent, in a transcendent mode, according to the wholeness of his being, the wholeness of his person, and then in a more immanent mode, which involves dividing himself, so to speak, appearing, taking on individuated appearances, which is a function of the dual. So the dual actually exists eternally as well, but it exists within the essential non-duality of all things. So there is a co-equality, in a sense, of non-duality and duality. They're not two, oneness and two-ness. It's not like they're irreconcilable. They are an interlocking part of one another, aspect of one another. The dual co-inhering in the non-dual being constituted by the dual. Hence, the singular person of God being constituted by the dual sort of spirit body aspect, right? So that's to give you a little more background on that, to try to flesh that out a little more clearly perhaps than I have in previous videos, and to address the issue of immortality to illustrate what I mean. All right, so that will do it for this one. And I haven't decided how I'm going about the next one or what the specific topic will be, but I have a pretty good idea of where we're going with that one. All right, bye.